For more now, we're joined by Jason Rezaian. He's the director of Press Freedom Initiatives and a former Washington Post correspondent in Tehran. He spent 544 days imprisoned in Iran. In fact, your release was 10 years ago this week. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. In your op-ed in the Post, you say that you've been waiting for this electrifying moment in Iran for 10 years. What makes these protests different than the ones that have occurred in recent years?
What's been really interesting to me and what's different this time around is that the scope of these protests across the country is more varied and vast among different ethnic and religious groups in rural communities as well as urban ones, among all socioeconomic classes, and the very clear call from protesters that they've had enough of this authoritarian state.
Have you been able to get in touch with anyone on the ground there in recent days? If so, what are they telling you?
Unfortunately, haven't been able to communicate directly with anybody inside Iran for a week. And that's a shocking thing in 2026. People have been taken almost completely off the global grid. And, you know, the fact that the regime is willing to do that gives you an indication of how big a threat they see this as. Iran is like any other country in the world that's heavily reliant on the internet for banking and all manner of businesses. All of that has been cut at a huge expense to the country's economy for over a week now. But the sporadic reports of people who've been able to connect through Starlink tell a grim tale of carnage in the streets, and you know, the use of military grade weaponry, the sort of weapons that you would use in a war on civilians protesting peacefully in the street. This is not new for this regime. Repression is part and parcel of how they've controlled the country for all of these years. They've never had to resort to such extreme violence, which is an indication of just how angry and how resilient and brave these protesters are.
You've stated before that Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, isn't ready to lead the country. So if the Iranian regime were to fall, who would be ready to step in, and what would governance look like?
I don't think that there's a clear answer to who could or should step into that power gap. It's a fact that Reza Pahlavi's name has been chanted in these protests. Now, I don't think that means that he's qualified, and I think that there's some very real questions about his commitment to a democratic transition and what that would look like. I think what we need to be focusing on, rather than who the next leader of Iran would be, is how do we support these protesters and their very legitimate demands for a democratic transition. And we have really failed to help them in those efforts to this point.
Do you believe that protests in Iran alone can topple the regime, or would you like to see the United States intervene?
I think that depends on what intervention looks like. To me, the idea of military strikes on nuclear facilities or military positions inside Iran would not lead to anything more destabilizing than they're already experiencing. I think getting the country back online, being able to document what's happened in the last few days, and creating a groundswell of support in the international community to hold these officials accountable is one big piece of what needs to happen here.
Jason Rezaian, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.